Hello and welcome to Coding with Jess, where you code along with me while I build a thing. It's been a few years since I've said that statement on camera, maybe something like that. Used to live stream quite a bit, and so I have quite the back catalog, but it has been a while since I've done it. But today I realized there's a perfect kind of topic for me to jump into and live stream some work that's useful for me and might be useful for you as well. So just to kind of lay some ground rules, today's going to be a 1 hour session. If you've ever watched my live streams before, they're generally like 2 hours long with a break every 25 minutes, so kind of pomodoros throughout. And yeah, we're actually going to be digging in and doing some implementation here in just a second. So glad that you are tagging along. And feel free to drop chat messages in the chat. I try to watch the chat and respond to things as we're going along. Can be very helpful, especially when I'm stuck, and you can help me get unstuck. All right, so what are we doing today? Today we are working on we're going to build a LiveStore app, and we'll talk about what LiveStore is again in a second for those of you who are not familiar with it. And we're going to use the Claude Agents SDK, which is a way of basically bringing the Claude code agentic loop into your application so that you're using their memory system, all of the different things that the Claude Agent SDK does. We're doing that because I'm working on a LiveStore app called Work Squared, and Work Squared is this agentic environment. And one of the things that I'm realizing more and more is that what differentiates Work Squared from other applications is not the core agentic loop at all, but like all of the things around that. And so I'd really like to use someone else's agentic loop, and Claude Codes is quite nice. I use it all the time for coding. And so to bring that in to the application would be kind of great. So we're going to try that out. Okay, so let's just jump right in. What is LiveStore? So if you haven't seen LiveStore before, it's a great local first framework from Johannes Schickling. And the core ideas behind LiveStore is that it is local first in the sense that each device that is connected to a synchronization server has a local copy of the database on there. It's event sourced or event source structured so that every manipulation to the database, rather than actually doing a SQL update of a specific row, you fire off an event. That event is then materialized into an update to the database table. And there's a lot of advantages of that. We can talk about that later. But anyway, it's a really nice, it's it's new, but it's very nice, fairly well developed, built on top of SQLite, has some other like really cool capabilities to it. I definitely recommend checking it out. I've been using it for Work Squared for several months now and have been really impressed. Yeah, don't be afraid with the release v0.3. Jump in and give it a try. It's actually surprisingly mature. I'm probably one of those few fools who's using it on a production application, and that's part of why we're pairing on this today. All right, so that's LiveStore. You can find Work Squared at worksquared.ai if you want to find out more about that. The source for Work Squared is available, so if you're looking to like dig into a reasonably complicated LiveStore application, or LiveStore powered application, Work Squared is a pretty good example, and you can kind of see how it's been built over the last 2 or 3 months. But today we're not going to be in the Work Squared GitHub repo, and there's a reason for that. I want to do basically a spike into the Claude Agents SDK and to see how that interoperates with LiveStore, and to get a feeling for like what the architectural patterns are, what works well, what doesn't work. I'm definitely going to have to shift some of the ways that I do things in Work Squared in order to accommodate using the Claude Agents SDK. And I'm really kind of curious, what am I going to have to give up? And then what am I going to gain by using the Claude Agents SDK? So the result of this spike will be a decision either to adopt the Claude Agents SDK as the agentic loop inside of Work Squared, or it'll be a decision of why not to do that. And the output of that will eventually land in an architecture decision record in the docs ADRs folder of Work Squared that documents why we're doing this. So today it's a spike. Spikes are a great opportunity to try something out in a new repo where you're kind of greenfielding it. You can move really quickly. You can try things without having to worry about breaking things, without like worrying about backwards compatibility. So that's why we're doing that. Yeah, for those of you who have not heard of the Claude Agents SDK, let's go look at that for a second. So Unless you've been living under a rock, you've definitely heard of Claude Code. I've been using it for several months now to build most of Work Squared. Used a couple other models along the way as well, but you can actually walk through the Work Squared repo and see a bunch of closed PRs that are mostly Claude Code written. The Claude Agents SDK is the agentic loop inside of Claude Code. Anthropic has basically removed that agentic loop and made it into an SDK that you can then utilize as well. That has a lot of the cool features that that Claude Code has as well. So there's different things like MCP tools are supported. You can use subagents, which is like a pretty interesting thing. There's slash commands. They give you things like tracking cost, usage. To-do lists are pretty interesting implementation, lightweight implementation of memory, which are available in Claude SDK as well. So lots of interesting things to using the Claude Agent SDK. If you've tried to write an agentic loop before, that's basically a fancy term for putting an LLM in a loop, giving it some tools and a goal, and giving it like a while loop, and it gets to decide when it's done. So they aren't hard to write to get started, but they are very hard to do well. I've been working on agentic agentic loops. It still sounds stupid every time I say it, but I'm just going to say it because that's what it is. I've been working on agentic loops since last fall for a couple of different agent enabled environments that I've been building, and I've definitely really come to respect that building a agentic loop is not a simple thing. Simon Willison recently wrote a blog post about this exact topic that I think, what would he call it? Agentic Designing agentic loops, where he basically just goes into the reality that there's actually some real critical skill that needs to be developed around designing agentic loops. Could not agree more. This is a great little, like, pretty high level blog post that kind of motivates what is an agentic loop, what is different, how is it different from prompting like a single LLM call, and why is it hard? Like, what are some of the hard things about it? If you're really interested in reading more, though, before we jump in, I would highly recommend the Managing Context post from Anthropic that they dropped a couple of days ago. And this post is great for going into. Oh, this isn't the one. There's one that's in their docs, Anthropic, that they dropped just recently around context engineering that really goes into a deep dive on how managing an agentic loop, you're having to manage the context, and that's like one of the hardest problems about it. I'll find a link to that document. You can probably find it on Claude's website. This is sort of like the high level version of it. Um, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're gonna jump over to I have Work Squared under my organization account, Sociotechnica, but I'm just gonna create this under Jess Martin. So we're gonna go create a new repository right now. Let me go think. Do I want to start from a templated LiveStore, or do I want to start a brand new vanilla? Um, To-do app with workspaces actually might be pretty helpful. If you're looking at LiveStore now, the 0.4 version is going to be dropping very soon. And so make sure you go up to the version picker and pick 0.4 from up here. And go ahead and start using 0.4. Don't use 0.3 or 0.3.1, which is the latest LiveStore like release. Go ahead and grab the new thing. You'll be better off for it. Let's see. Okay, so it might be that I want to use one of their example apps. They have quite a few example apps in the monorepo under examples, and it could be helpful. What I'm thinking is when we're writing the agentic loop, I need the idea with Work Squared, and the reason that this agentic loop is important is that as the user is using the LiveStore app, they're sending off these different events, they're running these queries to query things from LiveStore. The agent should have that exact same set of tools. They should be able to send different events to modify the area. They should also be able to use queries to pull things into context so that it can make decisions. So I just need an example application that has some tooling that the user can use and some tooling that the agent can interact with as well. So what I've been doing in Work Squared, like I have a Kanban board and documents and a chat interface. So we'll need a chat interface to interact with the agentic loop, and we'll need some kind of something um, for it to interact with. Um, so all of these examples, which one do we want to use? The ones that are postfixed with sync have a sync server set up with them, and this is going to be pretty important for this example. So actually, let me see if my whiteboard cam is working. Let's see. That is definitely not the way it should look. Let me go turn off portrait mode. Hello. Interesting. Hmm. Yeah, I would definitely consider that to not be working. We'll go back over to here. Anyway, so the deal with these different, we're gonna want a sync service for this. Let me like pull up a whiteboard real quick to give you an idea of, since my whiteboard is not working, our whiteboard camera's not working. Let's see. Let's create a new thing, give it a date. All right. So with I want references, show grid. Here we go. All right, cool. So we're gonna have a different clients that are connecting to uh, each other through a sync server. So basically the way that LiveStore works architecturally is you might have client one, client two, and there'll be some sync server between the two of them, and that needs to run somewhere. And so these different examples that have sync on the end have that sync server configured in the example. So you could just build a LiveStore app that's client only. It wouldn't be multiplayer. It would save the data locally. So like there's like a little database here, DB, little in memory, not in memory, sorry, SQLite database. I mean, you could use in memory, but the way to do it is normally with a database or with SQLite database. So that's in each one of these guys, and then events get transmitted between these, and then you get, because of that, you get like some really nice properties of like multiplayer, um, being able to connect to the sync server and everybody staying in the same state and all that kind of stuff. Let me turn both ways. Really wish my whiteboard cam was working. It's so nice to have a whiteboard in the office. As much as I love TL Draw. All right, so yeah, there's events going back and forth between the sync server, and so the reason we're going to want a sync server here is part of the agentic loop where it's going to be running. It's going to be hitting the Claude API, and that Claude API is going to be sending back and forth messages to the LLM. Now, the way that I have this structured in the way I have it structured in Work Squared is I have a server that's running in render.com. Eventually, this is going to be running in Cloudflare if I move it over to like some of the new architectural stuff that Johannes has been working on. It also has its DB. It also connects to the sync server. It sends events back and forth. And then the important thing is that the render.com server is the only thing that sends LLM calls, LLM API calls back and forth. This is really important because the events that trigger LLM API calls are actually getting sent to all of the clients, and we actually want those LLM API calls to only come from a single client. And so right now they come from this sort of designated server. It's the only one that's watching for those events and making sure that they get sent there. there's still some like once and only once execution stuff, some replay stuff that we want to figure out, and we can. That's one of the fun parts about this particular spike is we can like delve into some of the more complicated parts of LiveStore as we go through. Um, so we're going to want an example that has a client front end that has a sync server and that we're going to have some server or client, doesn't have to run in render necessarily, that is special, that watches for specific kinds of events and then sends off LLM API calls to the Claude API and runs. This is where the agentic loop will run, will be on this special Claude Agent SDK. And it will be sending off these calls. Boop. And then there's some open questions right now from an architecture standpoint about how to expose tools. So let's like look at that real quick and see if we can at least draw a drawing that makes sense, because that's going to help us kind of steer what we do as well as decide which example to choose from. So let's go read the docs on the Claude Agent SDK. So Claude Agent SDK comes with a specific set of tools that it has out of the box. Some of those tools are not really going to make sense in the context of LiveStore, like a web application, that kind of thing. Some of them are like file system manipulation tools and things like that. So we'll want to figure out which set of tools. Like we're going to have to figure out how to enable or disable tools that come with the Claude Agent SDK. So let's actually look and see. They've got some common workflows. No, that's not right. That's related. TypeScript SDK. I wonder if they have a tool set list. Tool input types, tool output types. Oh, interesting. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Tool inputs. All right, agent input, bash input. Yeah, so bash editing or bash commands that you can run, file editing commands. Does the Claude Agent SDK like does it have to have a file system and be able to run bash? Like I'm thinking that I'm going to be able to turn some of these tools off. That's my assumption. But that's the whole reason for spiking into this is to test some of those assumptions. Kill shell input, glob input. Okay, so these are, and then there's tool output types. Same thing, bash, edit, multi-edits, edit multiple files, read and write files, glob grep, kill bash, web fetch, web search, to do write. Yeah, this would be, the web fetch and web search, by the way, would be enormously helpful to have as part of the agentic loop. It's like one of the harder parts of the thing to design. So if I can like piggyback on Anthropic's web search stuff, that would be tremendous. Um, all right, let's see then. Okay, so is there a way to specify which, I'm going to get hooks, SDK messages, can use tool, custom permission function for tool usage, allowed tools, here we go, list of allowed tools named. So we can customize the list of tools. There's some that are already included with Claude Code that which we'll want to use, and there's a lot that we won't. Um, I wonder, why do they have allowed tools and disallowed tools? Seems strange. Like if it's not in the allowed tools, isn't it implicitly disallowed? Maybe you have to list all tools from the tool in either allowed or disallowed. Otherwise, the behavior is undefined. I'm not sure. That's kind of strange. Reasonable question. Let me go. Oh, right. We're going to create a repository for this first. I was about to create a document. We'll go ahead and create a doc here in like our work squared main, because this is, like I mentioned, this is going to become an ADR doc in the work squared repo. So Claude Agent SDK. All right. Open question. This will be my scratch pad for now. And I'll check it in on a branch in the work squared repo, and that way I can at least keep track of that. Do we have to list all tools in allowed tools and disallowed tools? Another question related to that is that also where I list out the MCP tools, which we're going to talk about in just a second. All right. Okay. So back over here, looking through the docs, we'll definitely be able to limit down the tools that we need somehow using those two parameters that we pass in. Now, the part that we're going to have to figure out, and this is where I was drawing this diagram of work squared and the Claude Agent SDK, is how does the Claude Agent SDK, when it gets back a tool call from the Claude API, so the response to one of this LLM API calls might say, you should use this tool and you should use it in this way. When we get one of those responses, how do we actually execute that tool call? That tool call will be something like, let's assume if we had like a Kanban board, it might be like add card or edit card or something like that to modify something in LiveStore. My understanding is that to add custom tools to Claude Agent SDK, we have to add them as like MCP enabled tools. So there's going to be some way of setting up the tools around the Claude Agent SDK that requires us to format them as MCP tools. Now, the reason this is both is interesting is because I've been thinking and I've been talking to Johannes a little bit about potentially enabling all events. Like, is there a programmatic and automatic way to expose LiveStore's events and LiveStore's queries as MCP tools so that you don't have to manually expose each one of them as events and queries? Because that would be pretty cool if you could have like a LiveStore MCP server that you just start up and it reads your schema and automatically builds tools for all of the queries and all of the events. That would be pretty rad. So that might be something that we work on alongside this, but the important thing is just getting our mental model correct about when the LLM tool call comes back, how do we actually instrument LiveStore? And then we can work on doing fancy things like automatic instrumentation of the MCP tool set, which would be super cool for a lot of reasons, actually, and also cool for work squared. All right, so I'm going to jump down to custom tools and let's go through this and see if this might reveal some of the things some things about the functionality here. So build and integrate custom tools to extend Claude Agents SDK's functionality. This seems such an obvious thing that you'll want to do with Claude Agent SDK is bring your own tools, not just the one that Claude Agent SDK provides. All right, custom tools allow you to extend, your own functionality through, in-process MCP servers. This is important. In-process, not external MCP servers. Okay, enabling Claude to interact with external services, APIs, or perform specialized operations. MCP servers can either be like external services or they can be, this in-process piece. That is a loaded term there. I'm very curious to see how this is going to work. So we pass the custom server to the query function. All right, let's go back to here. To create a tool, this all looks like pretty standard tool creation stuff. If you've done any LLM calls where you pass in a tool array, this all looks pretty straightforward. Now this is interesting. This looks like a standard, so create SDK MCP server is the function here. Creates an SDK. Oh, wow, that's really simple. Interesting. Okay, well, that's why it's the in-process bit. This is a nice, really nice like API for, okay, so I had thought this was like something more sophisticated, and I'm kind of seeing, now that I see the way that they've set up the API here, we're going to talk through this and the way that they've structured it. Now that I'm seeing the API, it may not actually work with my idea around automatically exposing a set of LiveStore MCP tools. I mean, don't get me wrong, we could probably code gen a lot of this stuff. And it's pretty minimal boilerplate. So, getting this up and running very quickly with a LiveStore instance and a set of LiveStore events shouldn't be too difficult. But let's talk through it here. So it looks like for each set of tools, right? You could do this once for many tools. You could do more than one MCP server. So even how you divide up the tools across servers is kind of an open question here. But you create an MCP SDK MCP server. You give the tool a name. This is pretty standard. A description. This is actually pretty standard, but also pretty important because this tells the LLM how to use the tool. Some of these descriptions sometimes need to be pretty robust. These are the parameters that you're going to pass into the tool. Again, this describe block here is actually pretty important as well, for helping the LLM use the tool well. And then you just pass in an async function, it looks like, where does it have to be async? Maybe not. There's some LiveStore is one of the things that is cool about it is that you can do synchronous events. You can send events synchronously, and you don't have to use async await. So it's possible that this could be just like a normal function that's not async. This one's async because it's awaiting that external fetch. And grabbing the JSON from it. But yeah, that's all it is. Hits an external API, gets the data back from it, and then returns that. This is kind of what I usually call like the formatter of this. This is the content that will get sent back to the LLM. All right. Using custom tools, pass the custom tools to the query function via the MCP servers option. The query function. All right, let's see what he means here. Aha, here we go, getting to configuring allowed tools. So the allowed tools must be the set of MCP tools then? When MCP tools are exposed to Claude, their names follow a format. MCP underscore underscore server name. So we might be like MCP underscore underscore LiveStore underscore underscore add card or whatever. A tool name get weather in the server my custom tools becomes that. Sure, okay. You can control which tools by calling it that. So we're gonna have to optionally specify which tools Claude can use. All right. So here's the MCP server. What was the bit about query? For await const messages of query. Okay, so you're like configuring the query. This is like a single request. I guess they're calling that a query. Does that kick off the loop right here? If message type result, message type subtype success. Yeah, I'm not quite following this. For await const message of query. An async function. This I was reading about. Okay, so this we're going to have to, I think your MCP servers have to handle streaming responses. If I remember reading MCP. Okay, they didn't address it here. I read somewhere in here that like you must use stream. So streaming is an optional thing that you can enable. Streaming input mode versus single message input. Oh, yeah, that's more like, okay, yeah, streaming input mode is the preferred way to use Claude Agent SDK. And I think our MCP custom tools are impacted because of that. We actually have to respond. We have to pass back this async function pointer to this generate message that can yield back the message. Even this seems weird to me. This is not oh, there's the prompt right there. Okay, gotcha. Prompt's right here at the top of the query. So this definitely is going to start out the run. Here's a multi-tool example. All right. This seems pretty straightforward. Type safety with Python. I love that they have this type safety with Python, and then they have a TypeScript example. This should probably just say type safety, since it has both. And yeah, they're using Zod schemas for type safety on the TypeScript side. Here's how we do error handling at the tool level. Yeah, okay, gotcha. So here's a database query tool that queries the database. Different examples, API gateway, calculator. Okay. These all seem pretty straightforward. So if we go back to our drawing, what is happening here? The Claude Agent SDK is going to be running on this special LiveStore client. So let's go and remind ourselves that these are LiveStore clients, and you are LiveStore, and you are LiveStore, and you're a LiveStore sync server. Sync servers just have the events, by the way. They don't have the full, they don't have a fully materialized database. So should I put a little events and make this small, right, right. I really love padding in a TL draw. This is why I always do this. Boop. I want it to be smaller. Events. Group it. Throw it in there. All right, so yeah, the sync server just has the events, and they get passed back and forth, and then these individual LiveStore clients actually have the fully materialized database. All right, so, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll try to respond. So the Claude Agent SDK here. Okay, so there will be a set of tools that get called from within the Claude Agent SDK. And those tools will have LiveStore access, which will then transmit events. And I don't know that it's any more complicated than that, honestly. Like, this all seems pretty straightforward. It seems like the MCP serverness of these tools is handled inside the Claude Agent SDK. Yeah, like, I mean, how would you integrate with an external? Like, let's say that we wanted a different architecture. Let's say we wanted a um, LiveStore MCP server, and then that LiveStore MCP server exposed a set of tools and events. Like, actually, I haven't built an MCP server before, so I'm actually I've heard a lot of conversations about it, but I haven't built one myself, so I'm not super experienced with these things. But yeah, a LiveStore MCP server would expose a set of tools. Bring this to the front. It would expose a set of tools, and it would also be the thing that fires off the events, and have the LiveStore-ness of it. And then the Claude Agent SDK, at least my understanding, is that it would be the thing that connects to, more space even, that it would connect to this via some like MCP connection. I don't know. But I don't see anything in here that indicates, in the documentation, that indicates how this MCP connection would work with Claude Agent SDK. So let's dig around a little bit more. I have a feeling we're going to want to use this simple architecture that they've laid out. It makes sense. We can basically instantiate a MCP server right inside of the Claude Agent SDK. It apparently will do the MCP negotiation and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, this in-process MCP servers is an interesting idea. Let's go look at MCP in the SDK real quick. So we can extend Claude Code with custom tools using Model Context Protocol servers. So this would be probably integrating with an external MCP server. All right, in this case, we're back to that example where we have query. Here's the prompt, list files in my project. And then we've got an options array where we can pass in an MCP server. This MCP server is a server file system that gives access to certain parts of the file system. Yeah, I mean, this kind of makes sense. The command npx here, is this going to start this? Like, is this MCP server already running somewhere? This is where my brain kind of breaks down around MCP architecture right now because I haven't built one myself. Um, SDK MCP servers, in-process servers running within your application. For detailed information on creating custom tools, see the custom tools guide. Oof. Looks like somebody stopped writing at this point in the documentation. Anthropic, if you're listening. Yeah, there's maybe an example needed here, or maybe that just needs to be a period. I'm not sure. Um, all right, remote servers. Here we go. Remote servers with network communication are this standard I/O servers, external process communicating via standard in, standard out. Okay, so those are the two transport types. We could hit it via HTTP or SSE. If it's a remote server, standard in, standard out via like node, like process execution as the architecture here. Ugh. I don't think either one of those really makes sense for this structure, right? So this could be like standard IO or HTTP. Like we could set up a little, well, actually, if we were going to expose LiveStore as a MCP server, HTTP might be the right thing. It just feels weird because it's inside of like a client. Putting an HTTP call inside of a running system probably makes sense, but actually it might make sense to not even to think about this MCP server as living outside entirely of this client. That it's just another client. I know Johannes has thought more about this. Okay, rewinding back like 5 minutes ago, where I was saying probably want to go with the simplest pattern for using LiveStore MCP, and we can always improve the pattern and make it more interesting or more like dynamic in the future. But for the purposes of today, let me say like future architecture, and we're gonna like clone our little diagram here. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Whoa, how far down did I go? Oh, I forgot to hold option. All right, so today what we're going to do is not have a LiveStore MCP server, but rather have these LiveStore. There's going to be some weird stuff here, though. I'm already predicting because LiveStore, well, we'll just need the Claude Agent SDK to kind of have like a pointer into LiveStore when we're defining those tool calls. There's going to be this right here where we're creating those methods that define those events. I think it'll probably be pretty clean. Um, I just thought of another thing we could do to simplify. Yeah. So this avoids. So we definitely, with the future, where I'm going with work squared, I'm already in this world where I have multiple clients connecting to a sync server. I have a server that does all of the communication with like external API systems, Claude API, OpenAI's API, that kind of stuff. And I'm using that to ensure that all of the clients are not sending off stuff to the Claude API. And as well as I don't actually want the agent SDK, sorry, the agentic loop. I don't want the agentic loop running on the clients. I want it running on something that's not the client. And so I've already got this architecture in place. on the server on Work Squared. But today we could simplify it and just say, you know what? Forget the sync server, forget the clients. Why not just do this? Why not just have a Claude Agent SDK that hits LiveStore? LiveStore has the DB running, and then, I mean, this would be so much simpler, and we would get a pretty good sense for how things are working, and we don't necessarily need multi-client. And then once we get this working, we can upgrade to the full system. Let me go back to this, and like I mentioned before, because LiveStore is local first, we don't need we actually don't even need to transmit the events off that off device. Like we can just have this local client, and then that also handles, because there's only a single local client, there's only going to be one version of the Claude Agent SDK running. It'll be running client side, but that's totally fine. There's very little difference between clients and servers um, in um, in the LiveStore world. There's no conceptual difference really. Okay, so let's build that. Let's do this. This seems like the right thing to build today. And then we'll eventually get to like a future architecture, and maybe in a future coding session. It would be amazing if we can get this, make some progress here. Okay. All right. So I think we know what we're going to build now. We need to create a repo for it. The other question that we were asking is what should be the UI, and can we borrow one of these? Can we borrow one of these existing applications and build on top of it in order to not have to build our own UI? Um, I mean, I don't know any of these examples super duper well. I've been informed by a lot of them as I've been building over the last few months. I'm kind of inclined to just building a LiveStore app from scratch, actually having Claude Code build a LiveStore app from scratch. And that way I can control kind of every part of it and not wander into someone else's code and have to figure out how they're doing things. So let's do that. We'll do a blank slate application. The main thing we're going to need is chat. All right, so we'll need. Fortunately, Claude Code is like excellent at building chat applications, chat interfaces, and so we will have. So we'll need some chat. Boop. Actually, all right, so then we'll have back and forth here. This will allow us to see the different tool call results from things, but we also, so the chat is fine, and that'll give us the interface to interact with the model, but we need something more that we can see the user, that we can see the agent doing, and ideally that the user could do as well. Kanban has been my go-to or to do like for a while. It does have some like drag and drop complexity to it, which sometimes the model nails and sometimes I have to fidget with, which is not that much fun. I wonder what else we could do. You know what? I think I am going to go with Kanban. And the nice thing about Kanban is I want to try out another improvement to this system where I can kick off the agentic loop via a assigning a card to it, and this gives us the opportunity to try that out. Bring to front. All right, cool. So we'll do a little Kanban board and to do doing done, and we'll have a set of events and queries that map to moving cards around on that Kanban board, and then we'll be able to interact with the LLM to ask it to do things to that board, and then the user will get to do things to that board at the same time. That'll be pretty fun. All right, let's get started. Okay, let me see. iTerm, and come over here. Like I mentioned, I'm going to set up a new repo under my thing here. LiveStore Agent SDK Kanban. Example, words. And public, no template here. Haven't made a LiveStore starter template yet. That would be a pretty fun thing. I won't add a README just yet. Create repository. All right. Okay. BIR. This. And copy that. All right, we're on main and we are started up. Okay, Claude Agent SDK. You need to come into the same one. Claude YOLO. Yes, I run Claude in YOLO mode. All right, so hey Claude, build a simple LiveStore app that's a Kanban board with only 3 columns: to do, doing, done. No need for fanciness like custom columns or multiple boards. It should be a React app and ideally support drag and drop. Let me see if there's like a setting up LiveStore. It's been about 3 months since I've done this. Set up a new LiveStore app. Let's see. Getting started. Quick start. I use PNPM. We recommend using our template app following the steps below. Nope. We'll do this one. All right, cool. I can just copy this entire guy. Hey, Johannes, where's the... Oh, it's on wrong version. Make sure you're on the right version of the docs, as I mentioned a second ago. Really important that you're on 040. All right, so I'm going to grab this, copy this, and pass it to the LLM. Here are the getting started docs for LiveStore. Dev. Also, if you need to read the docs, let me grab this link Johannes sent me for the brand newestest docs. Use this URL. Create, this is an empty GitHub repo. So create a Claude.md, and you'll need to do some other stuff. Use PNPM, TypeScript, anything else I need to say? Vite, ask any clarifying questions now before you get started. I think that should give it enough to get going. and then we'll let Claude go off and do some stuff, and we'll work on some of the parts that we need to work on that are a little bit more in depth. Let's see. Oh. Use LiveStore version 0.4.0 dev.9. Dev version on npm. Let's see. Yeah, it is dev.9. I freaking love how Claude Code, you can talk to it while it's running. It's like one of the only models that I know of that supports that, and it integrates your comment into its overall agentic loop without interrupting the agentic loop, but just kind of adapts it and adds it in. One of the reasons I'm excited to try out the Claude agent loop as as the core loop inside Work Squared, because if it supports that kind of integrate and resume um, from the user, I think that's going to be really powerful, especially in the side Work Squared. The and inside of a LiveStore driven app, because LiveStore driven apps have this quality where there are events happening all the time as the event stream is like giving you context about what's happening in the environment. And if the agentic loop can be receiving some of those events while the agent is looping, I think that's going to be a really powerful model to adapt the direction that the agentic loop is heading. Um, yeah, in a really dynamic way. So this is again right why I think event sourcing is great relative to standard databases. Alrighty. So that'll probably take about 5 minutes for Claude to get going, but should be able to get it started. What can we work on alongside that? So we did have over here in Cursor our, not this, here we go. We had our Claude Agent SDK sort of ADR. So it might be helpful to kind of capture some of our thinking right now that um, you at least have to list out all the MVP tools. And they're not clear how to disable built-in tools. All right, we'll get to that. So thoughts on this? A couple things. We should start with in-process MCP servers for LiveStore, but may want to move to an external MCP server for LiveStore that communicates over HTTP SSE. Yeah, I think the more I think about it, I think that future architecture will be really powerful. I think if there was anything else that came out from our diving through the Claude Agent SDK docs, I think we're in a pretty good place here to kind of jump in and try things out. I don't know that there's any more things that we know right now. Looks like it's already building the Kanban board, the columns, the task cards. It did choose D&D kit, which is the kind of standard React drag and drop thing. Pretty nice tooling there. You'll need LiveStore events for create card, move card. Those are probably the only two for now. I guess rename or like update card to rename the card's title. And that's all yeah, that's a pretty simple. We may need others as well. Let's see. All right. Let's see, GitHub. Let me see if it's created a README yet. It has. Changes not staged for commit. What do you mean not staged? What? Was there already a README for this guy? Cursor. This up. Oh, README, README, README. Here we are. Oh, interesting. This looks like this got created by potentially one of the, um, like maybe the Vite.js. Maybe it ran a command to generate a Vite.js thing, or maybe it pulled its own. Interesting. Yeah, watching this is fascinating. All right, so we've got the Kanban board component. Oh, I didn't tell it to use Tailwind. Oh well, it's fine. We can move it to Tailwind later. Slash Claude Code can move it to Tailwind later. All right, cool. What do we have in the Claude MD so far? LiveStore events, task created, task moved, task updated, task deleted. Sure. To do, in process done, or in progress done, drag and drop. Tasks persist using LiveStore with OPFS storage, real-time updates with event sourcing. All this looks pretty standard. All right. How we doing, Claude Code? Are you ready yet? Yep, looks like it's trying to run it. Okay, cool. And it looks like it started the development server, so let's see how it's going. Oh, open Sociotechnica console. Error in the console dev server. One of the things I find really helpful is teaching Claude to see. So we're coming up on the end of our hour here, and like goal would be to at least get this up and running, and then we can maybe jump in to the interesting part of the Claude Agent SDK um, in a future session. But yeah, one of the things that I might do in between this session and the next one is is set up Storybook with this application and let Claude actually be able to see these stories and make fixes like this. All right, let's try running now. There we go. Cool. All right, great. So we have a rudimentary Kanban board. Make the board full width. All right, so we can add tasks. Let's see if that works. Something. Great. I can drag it. Great. Let's go see if these are actually coming up in LiveStore as events properly. Loading the dev tools for LiveStore. The dev tools are definitely one of the areas that LiveStore really shines. Ooh, you know what? My browser extension might be out of date with the new version of LiveStore. Let's see. Which version of LiveStore did it use? 040 dev 9. Yeah, I don't know that my browser bundle is using this. I should be able to hit them here though. Here we go. Cool. All right. So yeah, we've got task moved, task created, events coming through. We've got queries where it selects from. Yeah, sweet. So we have a working LiveStore app. Way to go, Claude. You nailed it. All right. So and then we got counts for each of the columns. Looks like you can't drag back to. Oh, there we go. Drag and drop's always a little finicky. Oh, let me just let it know. Clicking the edit button on the card engages drag, which doesn't open the edit dialog. Oh, cool. Well, we've got most of what we need. Columns should have a min width of 200 pixels. In just a second here, I'm going to go ahead and commit this to git add dot initial Kanban app LiveStore app. All right, great. And that's a small change. Column widths. All right. So we have our sample LiveStore app. We've got our architecture diagram for what we're going to do in terms of adding the Claude agentic or the Claude Agent SDK. This next session, so that kind of concludes our 1 hour session today. On the next session, I'll probably do sometime mid next week. I'll actually go ahead and get the Claude Agent SDK in here with a chat application and be able to see if we can kick it off and have it instrument some LiveStore events. But I think this is actually, now that I understand how the architecture works, I think this is actually going to go pretty quickly. And then we may be able to even get to the future architecture where we have a multi-client and sync server going on at the same time. Wow. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in for Coding with Jess. To get started on this Claude Agent SDK LiveStore app, we will pick it back up again next week. I'll put it on my YouTube and also, I guess, the Twitters or the X or whatever the heck that thing is called, and Blue Sky. It was fun getting back into this. And yeah, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to check out the GitHub repo. It's public on GitHub, and or ping me on various channels. And for now, uh, thanks for hanging out.